China's son. Prologue. Shuiwa took the little bundle from his mother's trembling hands. Inside were a pair of thick-soled cloth shoes she had made, 3 steamed buns, 2 patched pieces of clothing, and 20 yuan. His father squatted by the roadside, silently smoking his dry pipe.
The boy is leaving home. Can you not give him one kind look?
His mother said this to his father. His father stayed squatting there, still silent and sullen. Then she said again, "If you will not let the boy go, can you pay to build him a house and find him a wife?"
Go then. One after another, they all run off. Raising them is worse than raising a pen of dogs.
His father howled the words without lifting his head.
Shuiwa looked up at the village where he had been born and raised, a village trapped in eternal drought and kept alive only by the little rainwater stored in its cisterns. His family had no money for a cement cistern and still used an earthen one, so the water stank in hot weather. In past years, that foul water could still be boiled and drunk, bitter and astringent as it was. But this summer, even boiled water gave people diarrhea. A doctor from a nearby army unit said some poisonous stone in the soil had dissolved into it.
Shuiwa looked down at his father once more, then turned and walked away without looking back. He did not expect his father to raise his eyes. Whenever grief pressed on him, the old man would squat like that and smoke in silence for hours, as if he had become a clod of yellow earth. Yet Shuiwa seemed to see his father's face clearly, or rather, he felt he was walking across that face. The broad northwestern land around him was dry and yellow-brown, scored with cracks carved by erosion. Was it not the face of an old peasant? Everything here was the same. Trees, fields, houses, people, all black, yellow, and wrinkled.
He could not see the eyes of that immense face stretching to the horizon, but he could feel them there. Those huge eyes looked up at the sky. In youth, their gaze had been full of pleading for rain. In old age, only dullness remained. In truth, that giant face had always been dull. He did not believe this land had ever been young.
A gust of wind blew across, and the little road out of the village vanished in yellow dust. Shuiwa followed it and took the first step into his new life. That road would lead to a place he could never have imagined in his dreams. Drink water that is not bitter, and earn some money.
The first goal of his life. Drink water that is not bitter, and earn some money. So many lights. It was already dark when Shuiwa reached the mining area, a place made up of many privately opened small coal pits.
This is nothing. The city has real lights, far more than this.
Guoqiang, who had come to meet him, said this. Guoqiang was from Shuiwa's village, too, and had been away for many years.
Shuiwa followed Guoqiang to the workers' shed. At dinner, the water he drank was actually sweet. Guoqiang told him the mine used a deep well, so of course the water was not bitter. Then he added, "The water in the city is the truly good water."
At bedtime, Guoqiang handed Shuiwa a hard package to use as a pillow. When he opened it, he saw round rods wrapped in black plastic. When he peeled back the plastic, the rods were yellow, like soap.
Explosives.
Guoqiang said the word rolled over and fell asleep snoring. Shuiwa saw that he too was using the same thing as a pillow. There was a large pile under the bed and a bundle of detonators hanging overhead. Later, Shuiwa learned that those things would have been enough to wipe out his whole village. Guoqiang was the mine's blaster. The work in the mine was bitter and exhausting. Shuiwa worked at coal digging, cart pushing, and setting supports. Any one of those jobs could wear a man out in a single day. But Shuiwa had grown up with hardship, so he was not afraid of heavy work. What frightened him was the underground world. A person seemed to crawl into a black ant nest. At first it was like a nightmare, but later he got used to it. Wages were piecework. He could earn 150 yuan a month, and in good months a little over 200. Shuiwa felt very satisfied.
What satisfied Shuiwa most was still the water. After his first shift, black from head to foot like a lump of coal, he followed the other workers to bathe. There he saw people scoop water from a big pool with basins and pour it over themselves from head to foot, while black streams ran across the floor. He froze in astonishment. Heaven, how could people use water like that? It was all sweet water. Because of that sweet water, this blackened world became beautiful, beyond measure in Shuiwa's eyes.
But Guo Qiang kept urging Shuiwa to go into the city. Guo Qiang had once worked there, until he stole things from a construction site and was sent back to his registered home as an illegal drifter. He promised Shuiwa that the city would surely pay more, and would not work him to death like this.
While Shuiwa was still hesitating, Guo Qiang had an accident underground. That day, while he was clearing a misfired charge, the explosive went off. When they carried him up from the shaft, his whole body was studded with stone fragments. Before he died, he said one sentence to Shuiwa.
Go to the city. There are more lights there. Go to the city with more lights and sweeter water, and earn more money. The second goal of his life. Go to the city with more lights and sweeter water, and earn more money. The night here is like daytime.
Shuiwa said this in amazement. Guo Qiang had been right. There really were far more lights in the city. Now Shuiwa was walking with Erbao toward the railway station along the main street of the provincial capital, each of them carrying a shoeshine box. Erbao came from a village near Shuiwa's and had once worked in the provincial city with Guo Qiang. Using an address Guo Qiang had given him, Shuiwa had found him only after a great deal of trouble. Erbao no longer worked on construction sites. He shined shoes now. When Shuiwa found him, another shoe shiner who lived with him had just gone home on an errand. So Erbao gave Shuiwa a quick lesson, had him shoulder the kit, and took him out.
Shuiwa had little faith in this work. All along the road he thought that repairing shoes would make sense, but polishing them? Anyone who spent 1 yuan to have shoes polished, or 3 yuan if the polish was better, had to be ill in the head. Yet before their stand at the railway station was even set up, customers arrived. By 11 that night, Shuiwa had earned 14 yuan. On the way back, Erbao looked unlucky and said business had been bad today, clearly implying that Shuiwa had stolen his customers.
What are those big iron boxes under the windows?
Shuiwa asked, pointing at a building ahead, air conditioners. The rooms inside feel like early spring right now.
The city is really good.
Shuiwa said this as he wiped sweat from his face.
Here, as long as you can eat bitterness, earning a bowl of rice is easy. But if you want to build a family and a life, forget it.
As Erbao spoke, he pointed his chin toward that building. A home here costs 2,000 or 3,000 yuan per square meter. Shuiwa asked stupidly.
What is a square meter?
Erbao shook his head with contempt and did not bother to answer.
Shuiwa lived with more than 10 people in a rented temporary room. Most of them were peasants who had come to the city for migrant work or petty trade. The man whose place on the shared plank bed lay next to Shuiwa's, however, was a city man, though not from this city. While he stayed there, he seemed much like everyone else, eating the same food and cooling off shirtless outside at night. But every morning, he dressed in a suit and leather shoes and walked out as if he had become another person, like a golden phoenix flying from a chicken coop. His surname was Zhuang, and his given name was Yu. Nobody disliked him, mainly because he had brought one thing with him.
To Shuiwa, that thing looked like a large umbrella, but an umbrella made of mirrors shining bright inside. If it was set upside down in the sun and a pot of water was placed on a bracket at the handle, the bottom of the pot flashed with reflected light, and the water soon boiled. Later, Shuiwa learned it was called a solar cooker. Everyone used it to cook and boil water, saving a good deal of money, though it could not be used without sun.
This umbrella called a solar cooker had no ribs, only a thin sheet. Shuiwa was most bewildered when he watched Zhuang Yu fold it away. A slender wire ran from it into the room. When Zhuang Yu went inside and unplugged it, the umbrella collapsed with a puff onto the ground and became a piece of silver cloth. Shuiwa picked it up and studied it. It was soft and smooth, so light he could barely feel its weight. Its surface showed his own distorted reflection and shimmered with the colors on a soap bubble. When he loosened his hand, the silver cloth slipped silently through his fingers to the ground, like a handful of weightless mercury.
When Zhuang Yu plugged it in again, the silver cloth lazily opened like a lotus flower. Soon it became a round umbrella surface standing inverted on the ground. When Shuiwa touched it again, the surface was thin and hard. A light tap made a pleasant metallic sound. It was very strong. Once fixed to the ground, it could support a pot or kettle full of water.
Zhuang Yu told Shuiwa, "This is a nanomaterial. Its surface is smooth, it reflects very well, and its strength is high. Most important, under normal conditions, it is soft. But when a weak electric current passes through it, it becomes rigid."
Shuiwa later learned that this material, called nano-mirror film, was one of Zhuang Yu's research achievements. After applying for a patent, Zhuang Yu invested everything he owned to open a market for it. But several products, including the portable solar cooker, attracted no buyers. He lost all his capital and was now so poor he had to borrow rent money from Shuiwa. Even in this state, he was not depressed at all. Every day, he rushed around, trying to find an application for the new material. He told Shuiwa that this was the 13th city he had tried.
Besides the solar cooker, Zhuang Yu had a small piece of nano-mirror film. Usually it lay on the bedside table like a silver handkerchief. Each morning before going out, Zhuang Yu switched on a small power supply, and the silver handkerchief immediately hardened into a thin sheet, becoming a smooth little mirror. He would groom himself before it. One morning, while combing his hair at the mirror, he glanced sideways at Shuiwa, who had just climbed out of bed, and said,
"You should pay attention to your appearance. Wash your face often. Do not let your hair stay so messy. And these clothes of yours, cannot you buy a cheap new outfit?" Shuiwa took the mirror and looked at himself, then smiled and shook his head. He meant that for a shoe sheener, such trouble was useless.
Zhuang Yu leaned close to Shuiwa and said,
"Modern society is full of opportunity. Golden birds are flying all over the sky. One day, if you reach out, you may catch one. The condition is that you must take yourself seriously."
Shuiwa looked around. He saw no golden birds. He shook his head and said,
"I did not go to much school."
That is regrettable, of course. But who knows? Sometimes it may even be an advantage. The greatness of this age lies in its unpredictability. No one knows on whom a miracle will fall. Did you go to college? I have a doctorate in solid-state physics. Before I resigned, I was a university professor.
After Zhuang Yu left, Shuiwa stood dumbfounded for a long while. Then he shook his head again and thought, if someone like Zhuang Yu had run through 13 cities without catching that bird, how could he do it? He felt the man was mocking him. Still, the man himself was pitiful enough and ridiculous enough.
That night, some people in the room were asleep, and others had gathered to play cards. Shuiwa and Zhuang Yu went to a small restaurant a few steps outside to watch someone else's television. It was already midnight. The news was on, and the screen showed only the announcer, no other images.
At the State Council press conference held this afternoon, the spokesperson revealed that the world-renowned China Sun project has officially begun. It is another super-scale project to transform the nation's ecology after the 3 North Shelter Belt.
Shuiwa had heard of this project before. He knew it would build another sun in the sky, a sun that could bring more rainfall to the drought-stricken Northwest. To Shuiwa, this was too mysterious. As he always did when first encountering such things, he wanted to ask Zhuang Yu. But when he turned, he saw Zhuang Yu staring wide-eyed at the television, mouth half open, as if his soul had been seized by it. Shuiwa waved a hand in front of his face. Zhuang Yu did not react. Only long after the news item had passed did he return to himself and mutter,
Really? How did I not think of China's sun?
Shuiwa stared at him blankly. Zhuang Yu could not be unaware of something even Shuiwa knew. What Chinese person did not know about it? Of course he knew, he simply had not thought of it. But what had he thought of now? What could this matter have to do with Zhuang Yu, a destitute wanderer living in a sweltering temporary room?
Zhuang Yu said, "Remember what I said this morning. Now a golden bird has flown right in front of me, a huge one. In fact, it has been circling over my head all along, and I somehow did not feel it."
Shuiwa still looked at him in confusion. Zhuang Yu stood up. "I am going to Beijing. I will catch the 2:30 train. Little brother, come with me." Go to Beijing? To do what? Beijing is so big. What could we not do there? Even shining shoes will earn much more than here.
And so, that very night, Shuiwa and Zhuang Yu boarded a crowded train with no seats left. The train crossed the vast western plain in the dark and sped toward the direction where the sun rose. Go to a bigger city, see a bigger world, and earn more money.
The third goal of his life. Go to a bigger city, see a bigger world, and earn more money.
At his first sight of the capital, Shuiwa understood one thing. Some things can only be known after you see them. Imagination alone can never produce their true shape. Take Beijing at night. He had imagined it countless times. At first, it was only the lights of the town or the mine multiplied many times. Then it was the provincial capital's lights multiplied many times. But when the bus he and Zhuang Yu rode turned from West Station onto Chang'an Avenue, he knew that even if all those earlier lights were magnified 1,000 times, they would still not become Beijing's night. Of course, Beijing did not literally have 1,000 provincial capitals worth of lights. But there was something in Beijing that the Western city could never produce, no matter how it was stacked up.
Shuiwa and Zhuang Yu spent one night in a cheap basement hotel and separated the next morning. As they parted, Zhuang Yu wished Shuiwa good luck and said Shuiwa could come to him if he ever had trouble. But when Shuiwa asked him to leave a phone number or address, Zhuang Yu said he had nothing now.
Then how can I find you?
Shuiwa asked. After a while, watch television or read the newspapers. You will know where I am.
Watching Zhuang Yu's back recede, Shuiwa shook his head in confusion. Those words were truly hard to understand. The man did not have a single coin now. He could not even afford the hotel that day. Shuiwa had paid for breakfast. Even his solar cooker had been left with the landlord before they departed to cover the room charge. Now he was a beggar with nothing except a dream.
After parting from Zhuang Yu, Shuiwa immediately went to look for work, but the shock of the great city soon made him forget his purpose. All day he wandered without aim through the city, as if walking through fairyland, and did not feel tired at all.
Toward evening, he stood before one of the capital's new symbols, the 500-meter Unity Tower completed the year before, and looked up at its glass cliff piercing the clouds. On that surface, the darkening sunset glow and the soon-lit sea of city lights were staging a soul-snatching performance of light and shadow. Shuiwa watched until his neck ached. When he was about to leave, the building's own lights came on. This spectacle seized his whole body and mind with even greater force, and he continued to stand there, head raised, staring blankly.
You have been looking for a long time. Are you interested in this work? Shuiwa turned and saw that the speaker was a young man, dressed like a typical city person, but holding a yellow safety helmet. What work? Shuiwa asked, in confusion.
Then what were you looking at just now?
The man asked, pointing upward with the hand that held the helmet. Shuiwa looked up in the direction he pointed, and saw, on the high glass wall, several people who from here were only tiny black dots.
What are they doing so high up?
Shuiwa asked. He looked more carefully. Cleaning the glass? The man nodded. I am the personnel supervisor for Blue Sky Building Cleaning Company. Our company mainly contracts cleaning projects for high-rise buildings. Would you like to do this work?
Shuiwa looked up again. The ant-like black dots in the sky made him dizzy. That is too frightening.
If you are worried about safety, you can set your mind at ease. The work looks dangerous, and that is exactly why hiring is difficult. We are short of people now, but I guarantee that our safety measures are complete. As long as you strictly follow procedures, there will be absolutely no danger. The pay is the highest in comparable work. For you, monthly salary of $1,500, lunch included on work days, and the company buys personal accident insurance.
The amount startled Shuiwa. He stared blankly at the manager, who misunderstood his expression.
All right, then. We will cancel the probation period and add $300, $1,800 a month, and no more. In the past, this job had a base wage of only $400 or $500, plus piecework when there was work each day. Now, it is a fixed monthly salary. That is quite good.
And so, Shuiwa became a high-altitude building cleaner, known in English as a Spider-Man. Become a Beijinger. The fourth goal of his life, become a Beijinger.
Shuiwa and 4 co-workers descended carefully from the top floor of the aerospace tower. It took them 40 minutes to reach the 83rd floor where they had stopped the day before. The most dreaded task for Spider-Man was cleaning an undercut wall, a wall whose angle with the ground was less than 90 degrees. To express his perverse creativity, the designer of the aerospace tower had made the entire building lean, its top supported against the ground by a thin column. According to the famous architect, leaning better expressed a sense of rising. Perhaps that made sense,
The skyscraper was famous around the world and had become another landmark of Beijing.
But generations of that architectural master's ancestors had been cursed by Beijing's Spider-Men. Cleaning the aerospace tower was almost a nightmare for them, because one whole side of the leaning tower was an undercut wall, 400 meters high, with an angle to the ground of only 65 degrees.
After reaching the work position, Shuiwa looked up. The huge glass cliff over his head seemed to be toppling down. With one hand, he opened the cap of the cleaning fluid container. With the other, he gripped the handle of the suction cup tightly. This suction cup had been specially made for cleaning undercut walls, but it did not work well and often lost hold. Then a Spider-Man would swing away from the wall, hanging from his safety belt like a child on a swing in the air. This had happened many times while cleaning the aerospace tower, and each time it frightened the soul out of them.
Only yesterday, one of Shuiwa's co-workers lost suction, swung far out, then swung back and, pushed by strong wind, slammed straight into the wall. He smashed a large pane of glass and cut a long gash in his forehead and another in his arm. That expensive coated architectural glass would cost him a whole year's wages.
By now, Shuiwa had been a Spider-Man for more than 2 years, and the work was truly not easy. When the wind on the ground was force 2, at 100 meters it was force 5. On today's 400 and 500 meter super tall buildings, the wind was even stronger. The danger went without saying. Since the beginning of this century, Spider-Man had fallen from time to time. In winter, the strong wind was sharp as a knife. The hydrofluoric acid cleaner most often used for washing glass was highly corrosive, turning fingernails black before they fell off. In summer, to guard against the cleaning chemicals, they had to wear airtight raincoats, rain pants, and rubber boots.
If the glass was coated, the sun burned on his back, while the sunlight reflected from the glass in front of him made it impossible to open his eyes. At such times, Shuiwa felt as if he had been placed on Zhuangyu's solar cooker.
Yet Shuiwa loved this work. For more than a year, it had been the happiest time of his life. One reason was that among low-educated migrant workers from outside Beijing, Spider-Men earned relatively high incomes. More important, the work gave him a strange satisfaction. He liked best the jobs other workers did not want, cleaning newly completed super-tall buildings, all above 200 meters, the tallest reaching 500.
Suspended on the outer walls at the tops of those skyscrapers, Shuiwa could see Beijing spreading below in its entirety. The so-called high-rises built in the previous century looked so small from here. Farther away, they were like clusters of thin sticks planted in the ground, while the forbidden city at the center looked as if it had been built from golden blocks. At this height, the city's noise could not be heard. All of Beijing became a single whole visible at one glance, a vast living body with web-like roads for blood vessels, breathing quietly below.
Sometimes a skyscraper rose above the clouds, with its lower half wrapped in the darkness of a rainstorm, while the top stood in brilliant sunlight. While he worked, an endless rolling sea of cloud lay under his feet. Whenever this happened, Shuiwa felt that the strong wind above the clouds had blown his body transparent.
From this experience, Shuiwa learned a philosophy. Things can only be seen clearly from a height. If you are submerged inside this metropolis, everything around you is so complex that the city seems like a boundless maze. But when seen from up high, the entire city is only a giant ant nest of more than 10 million people, and the world around it is so vast.
After receiving his first wages, Shuiwa wandered through a large shopping mall. When he rode the elevator to the 3rd floor, he found a place that baffled him. Unlike the bustling first 2 floors, this hall was rather empty, with only several astonishingly large, low tables. On each broad tabletop stood a small cluster of buildings, each building about as tall as a book. Between the buildings were green lawns, white pavilions, and corridors. Those little buildings looked as if they were made of ivory and cheese, so lovely that, together with the lawns, they formed delicate small worlds. In Shuiwa's eyes, they were truly models of little heavens.
At first he guessed they were some kind of toy, but there were no children here, and the people around the tables all looked serious and solemn. He stood beside one little heaven and stared at it for a long time until a pretty saleswoman came to greet him. Only then did he learn that this was where commercial apartments were sold. He casually pointed to one small building and asked how much the top-floor apartment cost. The saleswoman told him it had 3 bedrooms and 1 living room at 3,500 yuan per square meter with a total price of 380,000. Shuiwa drew in a cold breath at the number, but the saleswoman's next words softened the cruel figure.
Installment payments, 1,500 to 2,000 yuan per month. He asked cautiously, I am not a Beijinger. Can I buy one? The saleswoman gave him a charming smile.
You are funny. The household registration system was abolished years ago. What is this about being a Beijinger or not? Once you live here, are you not a Beijinger?
After Shuiwa walked out of the mall, he wandered aimlessly along the streets for a long time. Nighttime Beijing glittered around him in every color. In his hands were several bright, colorful advertising leaflets the saleswoman had given him, and he stopped now and then to look at them. Only a little more than a month before, in the temporary room in that distant western city, owning an apartment even in the provincial capital had still been a myth to him. Now he was still quite far from buying that Beijing apartment, but it was no longer a myth. It had changed from myth into dream, and that dream, like those exquisite little models, stood solidly before his eyes where it could be touched.
Just then, someone inside knocked on the pane of glass Shuiwa was cleaning. That usually meant trouble. When a high-rise cleaner appeared outside an office window, the white-collar workers in super-tall buildings often felt an inexplicable annoyance, as if these workers really were alien giant spiders, just as their nickname said. The distance between them was far more than that sheet of glass. While Spider-Men worked, people inside either complained about noise or about sunlight being blocked, finding every possible way to make things difficult. The aerospace tower's glass was semi-reflective. Shuiwa looked in with effort and finally saw the person inside. It was Zhuangyu.
After they parted, Shuiwa had always thought about Zhuangyu. In his memory, Zhuangyu remained a homeless man in a suit and leather shoes, stumbling through a hard life in this great city. One deep autumn night, just as Shuiwa was silently worrying in his dormitory about how Zhuangyu would find winter clothes, he actually saw him on television. At that time, the China Sun Project was choosing the material for its reflector, the key technical core of the whole project. Among more than 10 candidate materials, the nano-mirror film developed by Zhuangyu was finally selected. Overnight, he changed from a scientific wanderer into one of the chief scientists of the China Sun Project, and became famous across the world. After that, although Zhuangyu appeared often in all kinds of media, Shuiwa instead forgot about him. He felt there was no longer any connection between them.
In that spacious office, Shuiwa saw that compared with 2 years before, Zhuangyu had not changed inside or out. He was even wearing the same suit. Now Shuiwa knew that this outfit, which had once seemed luxurious and high class in his eyes, was actually worn thin.
Shuiwa told him about his life in Beijing, then finally smiled and said,
"Looks like the two of us are both doing pretty well in Beijing." "Yes, yes, both doing well." Zhuang Yu nodded again and again, excited.
Actually, that morning when I said those things to you about the age and its opportunities, I had almost lost confidence in everything. I was saying them for myself. But this age really is full of opportunities. Shuiwa nodded. Golden birds are everywhere.
Then Shuiwa began to study the modern office. The most striking thing in it was an unusual set of decorations. The entire ceiling was a holographic star field, so a person in the office seemed to stand in a courtyard beneath a brilliant night sky. Against that starry background floated a silver circular curved surface. It was a mirror, much like Zhuang Yu's solar cooker, but Shuiwa knew this solar cooker might have an area of several dozen Beijings. In one corner of the ceiling hung a spherical lamp. Like the mirror, it floated unsupported in the air, giving off dazzling yellow light.
The mirror cast a beam of that light onto a large globe beside the desk, making a round, bright spot on its surface. The lamp sphere drifted slowly beneath the ceiling, while the mirror turned to track it, always maintaining the beam pointed at the globe. The star field, mirror, lamp sphere, beam, globe, and bright spot on the globe formed an abstract and mysterious composition.
Is this China's sun?
Shuiwa asked reverently, pointing at the mirror. Zhuang Yu nodded.
It is a reflector with an area of 30,000 square kilometers. From geosynchronous orbit, 36,000 kilometers high, it reflects sunlight toward Earth. From the ground, it looks as if another sun has appeared in the sky.
I have never understood. How can another sun in the sky make more rain on the ground?
This artificial sun can affect weather in many ways. For example, by changing the thermal balance of the atmosphere, influencing atmospheric circulation, increasing ocean evaporation, moving frontal surfaces, and so on. It cannot be explained in a few sentences. In fact, the orbital reflector is only one part of the China Sun project. The other part is a complex atmospheric motion model running on many supercomputers. It precisely simulates the state of atmospheric movement in a certain region, then finds a key point and applies the artificial sun's heat there. That creates a huge effect, enough to completely change the climate of the target region for a period of time. The process is extremely complicated. It is not my specialty, and I do not really understand it either.
Shuiwa then asked a question Zhuang Yu certainly could answer. He knew it was foolish, but he still gathered his courage and asked it. Such a huge thing hanging in the sky, will it not fall down?
Zhuang Yu silently looked at Shuiwa for several seconds, then glanced at his watch, slapped Shuiwa on the shoulder, and said, "Come on, I will buy you dinner, and at the same time I will help you understand why China's sun will not fall down." But the matter was far less simple than Zhuang Yu imagined. He had to move the lesson down to the lowest level. Shuiwa knew he lived on a round earth, but deep in his consciousness, the world still had the structure of a round sky over a square land. Zhuang Yu worked hard to make him truly understand that our world was only a small stone sphere floating in endless empty space. That evening, Shuiwa did not understand why China's sun would not fall down, but the universe in his mind had completely changed shape. He had entered his own Ptolemaic age. On the second evening, Zhuang Yu took Shuiwa to eat at a food stall and successfully brought him into the Copernican age.
After 2 more evenings, Shuiwa struggled into the Newtonian age and knew, though only knew, about universal gravitation. On the following evening, with the help of the large globe in the office, Zhuang Yu brought him into the spaceflight age. On the next day off, also before that globe, Shuiwa finally understood what geosynchronous orbit meant and at the same time understood why China's sun would not fall down.
That day, Zhuang Yu took Shuiwa to visit the command center of the China Sun project. On a tall screen appeared a full view of the China Sun construction site in geosynchronous orbit, several silver sheets drifting in black space, with space shuttles before them like tiny mosquitoes. What shook Shuiwa most was another large screen showing Earth from 36,000 kilometers up. He saw continents like sheets of cowhide floating on the ocean, mountain ranges like wrinkles in that cowhide, and clouds like bits of white sugar left on it. Zhuang Yu pointed out where his hometown was and where Beijing was. Shuiwa stared for a long time, then let one sentence slip out.
When a person stands this high, the things he thinks must be different.
3 months later, the main body of China's sun was complete. On the night of National Day, the reflector for the first time cast sunlight onto the night side of Earth and fixed its enormous light spot over the Beijing-Tianjin region. That night, Shuiwa stood in Tiananmen Square with hundreds of thousands of people and witnessed this magnificent sunrise. In the western night sky, the brightness of one star increased rapidly. Around that star, a circle of blue sky spread outward. When China's sun reached maximum brightness, that circle of blue occupied half the sky. At its edge, the color gradually changed from pure blue to yellow, orange-red, and deep violet. The ring of shifting colors surrounded the blue sky like a rainbow, forming what people called
the ring-shaped dawn. The phrase ended there.
Shuiwa did not return to the dormitory until 4 in the morning. He lay on his narrow upper bunk. China's sun's light came through the window and fell on the wall by his pillow, where the colorful real estate leaflets hung. Shuiwa tore those sheets of colored paper from the wall.
Under the heavenly light of China's sun, the ideal that had once stirred him so deeply seemed flat and tiny.
2 months later, the cleaning company's manager came to Shuiwa and said Chief Zhuang at the China Sun Project Command Center wanted to see him. Since finishing the aerospace tower job, Shuiwa had not seen Zhuang Yu again. Your son is truly great.
When he met Zhuang Yu in the aerospace tower office, Shuiwa praised him from the heart. It is our son, and you in particular have a share in it. You cannot see China's sun from here now. It is making snow for your hometown. My parents wrote that there really has been more snow there this winter.
But China's sun has also run into a major problem. Zhuang Yu pointed at a large screen behind him. On it were 2 circular light spots. These are images of China's sun taken from the same position, 2 months apart. Can you see any difference? The one on the left is brighter.
Look, in only 2 months, the drop in reflectivity is visible to the naked eye. What? Has dust fallen on the big mirror?
There is no dust in space, but there is the solar wind, the stream of particles emitted by the sun. Over time, it changes the properties of China's sun's mirror surface. A very thin mist film forms on the mirror, and its reflectivity drops. After a year, the mirror will look as if it is covered with water vapor. Then China's sun will become China Moon, and will be able to do nothing at all.
Did you not think of this at the beginning? Of course we did. But let us talk about you. Do you want to change jobs? Change jobs. What else can I do? Still high-altitude cleaning, but working here with us. Shuiwa looked around in confusion.
Was your building not just cleaned? Do you need to hire dedicated high-altitude cleaners? No, you will not be cleaning the building. You will be cleaning China Sun. Fly into space to clean the sun. The fifth goal of his life. Fly into space to clean the sun.
This was a meeting attended by senior leaders of the China Sun Project Operations Division, held to discuss the creation of a mirror surface cleaning organization. Zhuang Yu introduced Shuiwa to everyone and described his work. When someone asked about education, Shuiwa answered honestly that he had only attended 3 years of primary school.
But I can read. I have no problem reading books. Shuiwa said this to the attendees. A burst of laughter rang out.
Chief Zhuang, are you joking?
Someone shouted angrily. Zhuang Yu said calmly,
I am not joking. If a mirror cleaning team of 30 people were formed, cleaning all of China's sun once would take half a year. To meet the cleaning cycle, the team would have to work without pause, requiring at least 60 to 90 people in rotation. If the Space Labor Protection Act now being drafted is passed, that rotation may need even more people, which means 120 or even 150. Are we really going to make 150 astronauts with doctorates and 3,000 hours in high-performance fighter jets do this work?
Even so, they should be at least close to qualified. In an age when higher education has already become common in cities, you want to send an illiterate into space.
I am not illiterate.
Shuiwa said this to the man. The other man ignored him and continued speaking to Zhuang Yu. This is a profanation of this great project. The attendees nodded one after another in agreement. Zhuang Yu nodded too.
I expected this reaction from all of you. Everyone here except this cleaner has a doctorate. Very well. Let us see your qualifications for cleaning work. Please, follow me.
More than a dozen puzzled attendees followed Zhuang Yu out of the conference room and into the elevator. Elevators in this kind of skyscraper were divided into fast, medium, and slow. They took the fastest one. It accelerated sharply and shot straight to the top floor. Someone said,
This is my first time taking this elevator. It really feels like riding a rocket into space.
After we enter geosynchronous orbit, you will also experience the feeling of cleaning China's sun.
Zhuang Yu said this, and everyone around him gave him strange looks.
After leaving the elevator, they followed Zhuang Yu up a narrow ladder, then finally went through a small iron door onto the open roof. They were immediately surrounded by sunlight and strong wind. The blue sky above seemed much clearer than usual. Looking around, all of Beijing lay in view. They discovered that a small group was already waiting on the roof. Shuiwa was startled to see the cleaning company manager and his Spider-Man co-workers.
Zhuang Yu said loudly,
Now we will invite everyone to experience Shuiwa's work.
The Spider-Men came over and fastened safety belts onto every attendee. Then they led them to the roof edge and helped them carefully stand on the small hanging boards that served as Spider-Men's work platforms. The boards began to descend slowly and stopped 5 or 6 meters below the roof edge. Hanging on the glass wall of the building, the attendees gave a series of screams that contained not the slightest trace of acting.
Everyone, let us continue the meeting. Zhuang Yu crouched at the roof edge, leaned out, and shouted down to them,
You bastard! Pull us up now! Each of you must clean 1 pane of glass before you can come up.
Cleaning the glass was impossible. The people below could only clutch their safety belts or the ropes of the hanging boards and stay completely still. It was impossible for them to free one hand to pick up the brush on the board or open the cap of the cleaning fluid bucket. In their daily work, these space officials dealt with altitudes of tens of thousands of kilometers on drawings and documents. But in this bodily experience, a height of 400 meters had already driven their souls from their bodies.
Zhuang Yu stood up and walked above an Air Force colonel, the only one among the dozen lowered people who remained composed.
He had begun cleaning the glass, his movements steady. What surprised Shuiwa most was that both of the man's hands were working. He was not holding anything to stabilize himself, yet his hanging board stayed motionless against the wall in the strong wind. Even for Spider-Man, only old hands could do that. When Shuiwa recognized him as an astronaut from the Shenzhou 8 spacecraft more than 10 years before, what he saw no longer seemed strange.
Zhuang Yu asked, "Colonel Zhang, tell us frankly, is the work before you really easier than the extravehicular work you did in orbit?"
If we speak only of physical strength and skill, the difference is not very great.
The former astronaut answered.
Well said. A study by the Astronaut Training Center shows that in ergonomics, the work of high-rise building cleaners has many similarities to mirror surface cleaning in space. Both involve repetitive, monotonous, physically demanding labor in dangerous positions that require constant balance. Both require constant alertness. The slightest negligence can cause an accident. For an astronaut, the accident might be drifting incorrectly, losing tools or materials, or a failure of life support systems. For a Spider-Man, it might be smashing glass, dropping tools or cleaning fluid, or a safety belt breaking or slipping loose.
In physical ability and skill, and especially in psychological quality, Spider-Men are fully capable of mirror surface cleaning work. The former astronaut looked up at Zhuang Yu and nodded.
This reminds me of the old fable. An oil seller pours oil through the square hole of a copper coin into a flask. The skill required is as great as that of a general shooting an arrow into the bullseye. The only difference is their status. Zhuang Yu continued.
Columbus discovered America, and Cook discovered Australia. But those new worlds were developed by ordinary people, pioneers who in the Europe of their time stood at the bottom of society. Space development is the same. In the next 5-year plan, the state treats near-Earth space as the second West. That means the age of exploration in spaceflight has ended. It is no longer work for a small elite alone. Letting ordinary people enter space is the first step toward the industrialization of space development.
All right, everything you say is right. Just get us up here now.
The others below shouted until their voices were hoarse. On the elevator ride back, the cleaning company manager leaned close to Zhuang Yu's ear and whispered,
"Chief Zhuang, you spoke with passion for quite a while, but were those arguments a little too grand? Of course, in front of Shuiwa and my young brothers, you could not spell out the key point."
Zhuang Yu looked at him inquiringly.
Everyone knows it. The China Sun project is operating in a quasi-commercial manner. Halfway through, it almost stopped because of a funding gap. Now there is not much operating money left for you. In commercial spaceflight, a regular astronaut's annual salary is more than $1 million. These young men of mine can save you tens of millions every year.
Zhuang Yu smiled mysteriously and said,
"Do you think I would take this risk for a mere few tens of millions? This time, I deliberately pushed the educational standard for mirror cleaners down to the minimum. Once this precedent is set, other orbital jobs in China Sun's operation can be done by ordinary university graduates. That saves far more than a few tens of millions. As you said, this is the only way left. We really do not have much money,"
the manager said.
In my childhood and youth, entering space was such a romantic enterprise. I clearly remember that when Deng Xiaoping visited the Kennedy Space Center, he called an American astronaut an immortal. And now?
He patted Zhuang Yu's back, smiled bitterly, and shook his head. "We are the same kind of people." Zhuang Yu turned to look at the young Spider-Man and raised his voice. "Even so, sir, the salary I give them is still 8 to 10 times yours."
The next day, 60 Spider-Men, including Shuiwa, entered the China Astronaut Training Center in Shijingshan. All of them were rural youths who had come to Beijing from elsewhere to work, from remote corners of China's vast fields. Miro farmers, Miro farmers. At Xichang Base, Horizon.
The spaceplane nosed out of the great white fog pouring from its engines and roared up into the blue sky. In the cabin sat Shuiwa and 14 other mirror cleaners. After 3 months of ground training, they had been selected from the 60 as the first group to enter space for actual operations.
At this moment, Shuiwa felt that high acceleration was far less terrifying than legend claimed. He even felt a familiar comfort, the feeling of a child held tightly in his mother's arms. Outside the porthole above and to his right, the sky's blue was deepening. From outside came the faint cracking sounds of explosive bolts. The boosters separated, and the engine noise changed from a deafening roar to a mosquito-like hum. The sky turned deep violet, then completely black. Stars appeared, bright and steady, not twinkling. The hum stopped abruptly. The cabin became very quiet. The vibration of the seat disappeared, and then the pressure of the seat against his back vanished too. Weightlessness arrived.
Shuiwa and the others had trained for weightlessness in a huge pool. Now the feeling really was like floating in water.
But the safety belts still could not be unfastened. The engine began humming again. Gravity pressed everyone back into their seats, and the long transfer to the new orbit began. Through the small portholes, star fields and ocean alternated. The cabin was filled from time to time with blue light reflected from Earth and the white light of the sun. The curvature of the horizon visible in the window grew larger each time, and the range of ocean and land also widened. The transfer flight to geosynchronous orbit lasted a full 6 hours. The alternating view of stars and Earth gradually became drowsy, and Shuiwa actually fell asleep. But he was soon awakened by the commander's voice over the speaker, saying the transfer was complete.
His companions floated from their seats and pressed close to the portholes to look outside. Shuiwa also unfastened his belt and, with awkward swimming motions, floated to the nearest window. For the first time, he saw the whole Earth with his own eyes. But most of the others had crowded to the windows on the other side, so he kicked off the cabin wall and shot across, hitting his head on the opposite wall because he was moving too fast. Looking out through the porthole, he realized only then that Prologue had
Horizon had come directly beneath China's sun. The reflector occupied most of the starry sky, and the spaceplane seemed like a tiny mosquito flying under an enormous silver dome. Horizon
continued to approach, and Shuiwa gradually felt the mirror's immensity. It had filled all the space outside the window, and he could not sense its curvature at all. They seemed to be flying over a boundless silver plain. The distance kept shrinking, and the mirror's surface showed horizon. As a reflection, on the silver ground, long seams could be seen. Like lines of latitude and longitude on a map, they wove a grid and became the only reference that allowed a sense of relative speed. Gradually, the meridian seams on the silver ground were no longer parallel, but converged toward one point. The trend accelerated rapidly, as if Horizon.
We're heading toward a pole on this enormous map. The pole soon appeared. All the meridional seams converged on a small black dot. The spaceplane descended toward it, and Shuiwa was shocked to discover that the black dot was a building on this silver Earth, a fully sealed cylinder. He knew this was China's sun's control station, their only home in the cold and silent space for the next 3 months.
The life of space Spider-Men began like this. Every day since China's sun also took 24 hours to orbit Earth once, the mirror cleaners drove machines the size of walking tractors to polish the mirror surface. They drove back and forth over the broad mirror, much as if they were farming something on Silverland. Western news media, therefore, gave them a more poetic name.
Mirror farmers. These street farmers
had a strange world. Beneath their feet lay a silver plain. Because of the mirror's curvature, the plain rose slowly in every distant direction, but because the area was so huge, the surroundings looked as flat as water. Above them, Earth and the Sun always appeared at the same time. The latter was far smaller than Earth, and seemed instead like one of Earth's radiant satellites. On the Earth that occupied most of the sky, one could always see a slowly moving circular light spot. On Earth's night side, the spot was especially striking. That was the area illuminated by China Sun.
The mirror could change its shape to alter the size of the light spot. When the slope of the silver ground rising in the distance was steeper, the spot became smaller and brighter. When the slope was gentler, the spot became larger and dimmer.
But the work of the mirror cleaners was extremely hard. They soon discovered that cleaning the mirror was at least as monotonous and exhausting as cleaning high buildings on Earth. Each day, after returning to the control station from work, they were often too tired even to remove their spacesuits. As later groups arrived, the control station became crowded, and people lived as if in a submarine. Yet being able to return to the station counted as luck. The farthest part of the mirror lay nearly 100 kilometers from the station. When they cleaned the outer edge, they often could not return after work and had to spend the ascent.
feel the night there, drinking liquid food from the spacesuit and sleeping suspended in mid-air. The danger of the work went without saying. Mirror cleaners performed more spacewalks than anyone in human spaceflight history. In the field,
even a small spacesuit malfunction could be fatal. And there were micrometeorites, space debris, solar magnetic storms, and more. Such living and working conditions filled the control station's engineers with complaints, but the mirror farmers,
who were born able to endure hardships, silently adapted to it all. On the 5th day after entering space, Shuiwa spoke with his family. At that moment, he was working more than 50 kilometers from the control station, and his hometown lay inside China Sun's light spot. Shuiwa's father,
"Son, are you on that sun? It is shining over our heads. This night is just like day." Shuiwa: "Yes, father, I am up here." Shuiwa's mother: "Son, is it hot up there?" Shuiwa:
Hot and cold both. I cast a shadow on the ground. Outside the shadow, it is as hot as 10 summers back home. Inside the shadow, it is as cold as 10 winters back home. Shuiwa's mother said to Shuiwa's father, "I can see our boy. There is a little black dot on that sun."
Shuiwa knew that was impossible. Tears welled out of him, and he said, "Father, mother, I can see you too. On that place on the Asian continent, there are also 2 little black dots. Wear more clothes tomorrow. I can see a big cold current moving toward you from the north of the continent. Silence."
3 months later, the second replacement team arrived, and Shuiwa and the others returned to Earth for 3 months of leave. The first thing each of them did after landing was buy a high-powered monocular telescope. 3 months later, they returned to China Sun. During breaks from work, everyone used telescopes to gaze at Earth. Naturally, they looked most often toward their hometowns. Though from 40,000 kilometers away, it was impossible to see their villages. One of them wrote a clumsy poem on the mirror surface with a thick marker.
On the silver land I gaze toward home. Beside the village, mother looks up at China Sun. This sun is her son's eye.
The yellow earth will wear green clothing in this gaze. The mirror farmers
did excellent work. They gradually took on more tasks beyond cleaning. First, they repaired mirror areas damaged by meteorites. Later, they undertook a higher-level task, monitoring and reinforcing points where stress exceeded limits.
During operation, China Sun's attitude was always changing, and those changes were carried out by 3,000 engines distributed across its back. The reflector surface was very thin, joined into a hole by many slender beams on the back. During attitude or shape changes, stress at some positions could exceed limits. If the thrust of the engines was not corrected in time, or if that position was not reinforced, the excess stress could develop and tear the mirror. This work had high technical demands. Both discovering and reinforcing overstressed points required skilled technique and rich experience.
Apart from attitude and shape adjustments, the most likely time for stress to exceed limits was during orbital haircutting. The operation's formal name was correction of orbital errors caused by light pressure and solar wind. Solar wind and light pressure exerted force on the enormous mirror surface, about 2 kilograms per square kilometer, causing the mirror's orbit to flatten and rise. On the large screen in the ground control center, the distorted orbit and the normal orbit were shown at the same time, looking as if hair had grown out of the normal orbit. That was where the strange nickname came from. During orbital haircutting, the acceleration imposed on the mirror was much greater than during attitude and shape adjustments, and at such times,
the mirror farmers were extremely important. They flew above the silver land, carefully observing every abnormal change on the surface and carrying out emergency reinforcement at any moment. Each time they completed the task brilliantly. Their income therefore increased greatly, but the greatest beneficiary was still Zhuangyu, who had become the first person in charge of the China Sun project. He no longer even had to hire ordinary university graduates.
But the mirror farmers
all understood that they were the first and last group of space workers with only primary school educations. Future space workers would have at least university degrees. But they had completed the mission Zhuangyu had imagined, proving that the lowest level work in space development most needed skill and experience, and the ability to adapt to harsh environments, not knowledge and creativity. Ordinary people could fully do it. Yet space was also changing the mirror farmers.
Way of thinking. No one else could look down at Earth from 36,000 kilometers every day as they did. Before them, the world was only a little sand table that could be taken in at one glance. The global village was not a metaphor to them, but a real thing before their eyes.
The mirror farmers,
as the first group of space industrial workers, had once caused a sensation around the world, but with the rapid industrialization of near-Earth space development, many super projects appeared in space, including enormous solar power stations transmitting electricity to the ground by microwave, microgravity product factories, and even space cities able to hold 100,000 people. Large numbers of industrial workers poured into space. They were all ordinary people, and the world gradually forgot.
The mirror farmers. They faded from memory.
Several years later, Shuiwa bought an apartment in Beijing, started a family, and had a child. Each year he spent half his time at home and half in space. He loved this work. Traveling for long periods across the Silverland, more than 30,000 kilometers high, gave his heart a detached serenity. He felt he had found his ideal life, and that the future stretched smoothly ahead like the silver plain beneath his feet. But one later event broke that serenity. and completely changed the path of Shuiwa's mind. That was his association with Stephen Hawking.
No one had expected Hawking to live past 100. This was both a medical miracle and a demonstration of his personal strength of spirit. After the first low-gravity space sanatorium was built in near-Earth orbit, he became its first patient. But the acceleration of going into space nearly killed him, and returning to the ground would also require enduring high acceleration. So before transport systems such as space elevators or anti-gravity cabins were invented, he might not be able to return to Earth. In fact, his doctors advised him to live in space permanently because a weightless environment suited his body better than anything else.
At first, Hawking had little interest in China's sun. He endured acceleration from low orbit again, though of course much less than from the ground into space, and came to China's sun in geosynchronous orbit because he wanted to see a cosmological observation being carried out there on minute anisotropies in background radiation intensity. The observatory was placed on the backside of China's sun because the enormous reflector could block interference from the sun and Earth. But after the observation was complete, and the observatory and research team had withdrawn, Hawking still did not want to leave. He said he liked it here, and wanted to stay a while longer. The press made all kinds of guesses about what in China's sun had attracted him, but only Shuiwa knew the truth.
During his days living on China's sun, Hawking's favorite thing was to take walks on the mirror surface. What was hard to understand was that he walked only on the back of the reflector, and each day he walked for several hours. Shuiwa, the person on the station with the richest spacewalking experience, was assigned to accompany the doctor. By this time, Hawking was already ranked with Einstein, and Shuiwa had of course heard of him. Still, when he first saw him inside the control station, Shuiwa was shocked. He could not imagine how a person paralyzed to such a degree could have achieved so much, though he still knew nothing about what this great scientist had actually done.
During their walks, however, Hawking's paralysis was not visible at all. Perhaps because of his experience controlling an electric wheelchair, he handled the small engines on his spacesuit as nimbly as a healthy person.
Communication between Hawking and Shuiwa was difficult. Although Hawking had an electronic speech system controlled by brainwaves implanted in him, so speaking was not as hard as it had been in the previous century. His words still had to be translated into Chinese by a real-time translator before Shuiwa could understand. Following instructions from the leaders, Shuiwa never started conversation, so as not to disturb the doctor's thinking. But the doctor was very willing to talk with him.
At first, the doctor asked Shuiwa about his life, then recalled his own early years. He told Shuiwa about the cold, gloomy house in St. Albans where he had lived as a child, the Wagner music echoing through the tall, frozen sitting room in winter, the circus wagon kept at Osmington Mills Farm, in which he and his sister Mary often rode to the beach, and the lighthouse on the Chilton estate that he often visited with his father. Shuiwa marveled at the memory of this 100-year-old man. What astonished him even more was that the two of them actually had things in common. Shuiwa told him everything about his hometown, and the doctor loved listening. When they reached the mirror's edge, Hawking even asks Shuiwa to point out the direction of his home.
As time passed, their conversations inevitably turned towards science. Shuiwa had thought this would end their rare communication, but it did not. To the doctor, explaining profound physics and cosmology to an ordinary person in the plainest language seemed to be a kind of rest. He told Shuiwa about the Big Bang, black holes, and quantum gravity. After returning to the station, Shuiwa gnawed through the thin little book the doctor had written in the previous century, then asked the station's engineers and scientists for help. To his surprise, he understood quite a lot.
Do you know why I like it here? During one walk to the mirror's edge, the doctor said this to Shuiwa while facing the corner of Earth exposed beyond the edge.
This great mirror separates the earth below from me, making me forget the existence of the mortal world and allowing me to face the universe with my whole being. Shuiwa said,
The world below is so complicated, but seen from far away here, the universe is so simple, just some stars scattered through space.
Yes, child, it really is so.
The doctor nodded.
The back of the reflector was a mirror surface like the front, only with attitude and shape control engines that looked like little black towers. During their daily walks, the doctor and Shuiwa drifted slowly close above the mirror, often from the center all the way to the edge. When there was no moon, the back of the reflector was very dark, its surface reflecting the starry sky. Compared with the front, the horizon here was close, and its arc could be seen. Under starlight, the black meridians and parallels made by support beams moved beneath their feet. They seemed to drift over the surface of a quiet little planet. When attitude or shape adjustments occurred, the engines on the reflector's back started.
The little planet's surface was lit by columns of tiny flame, making the place even more beautifully mysterious. Above this small world, the Milky Way shone brilliantly. In such surroundings, Shuiwa first came into contact with the deepest mysteries of the universe. He understood that all the starfields he saw were only a grain of dust in an unimaginably vast cosmos, and that the entire universe was no more than the afterglow of a magnificent firework set off 10 billion years before.
Many years before, when Shuiwa as a Spider-Man had stepped onto the roof of his first tall building, he saw all of Beijing. When he came to China's sun, he saw the whole Earth. Now, facing the third magnificent moment of his life, Shuiwa had climbed to the roof of the universe and seen things he could never have dreamed of. His knowledge was still rough and shallow, but it was enough to give that more distant world an irresistible pull over him.
Once Shuiwa told one of the station's engineers about a question that troubled him. Humans landed on the moon in the 1960s. Why did they later shrink back, so that even now they have not landed on Mars and have not even gone back to the moon? The engineer said,
Humans are realistic animals. Those things driven by idealism and faith in the middle of the last century did not have long lives.
Are ideals and faith bad?
Not bad exactly, but economic benefit is better. If, since that time, humanity had spared no cost and kept doing money, losing business by flying into outer space, Earth might still be poor now, and ordinary people like you and me might never have entered space at all, even if only near Earth space. Friend, do not get poisoned by Hawking. Ordinary people cannot play his game.
From then on, Shuiwa changed. He still worked as hard as before and lived calmly on the surface, but clearly he was thinking about more things.
Time flew, 20 years passed. During those 20 years, Shuiwa and his companions saw clearly, from 36,000 kilometers above, how their homeland and the world changed. They saw the 3 North Shelter Belt form a green belt stretching across China from east to west. Yellow desert gradually covered by green, their hometown no longer short of rain or snow, and the dry riverbed before the village again filled with clear water. China's sun had its share in all of this. It had played an important role in the great project to change the climate of the Northwest. Beyond that, China's sun had done many unusual things over the years, such as melting the snow on Kilimanjaro to relieve African drought and making an Olympic host city into a true sleepless city.
But for the newest technologies.
Influencing weather this way seemed too clumsy and had too many side effects. China's Sun had completed its mission.
The Ministry of National Space Industry held a grand ceremony to award medals to humanity's first group of space industrial workers. This was not only to honor their 20 years of diligent and outstanding work. More important, these 60 young people with only primary and middle school educations had gone into space to work, marking the opening of space development to everyone. Economists agreed that this was the true beginning of the industrialization of space development.
The ceremony drew great attention from the news media. Besides the reasons above, in the public mind, the mirror farmers had a legendary experience. And in this age of pursuit and forgetting, an opportunity for nostalgia was also rather pleasant.
Those simple and honest young men of the past were now middle-aged, but they had not changed very much. People could still recognize them on holographic television. Most had received higher education by various means, and some had even gained the title of space engineer. Yet in their own eyes, and in the public's eyes, they remained that group of migrant workers from the countryside.
Shuiwa spoke on behalf of his companions. He said, with the completion of the electromagnetic transport system, the cost of entering near-Earth space is now only half the cost of flying across the Pacific by air. Space travel has become an ordinary and unremarkable thing, but it is hard for the new generation to imagine what entering space meant to an ordinary person 20 years ago, hard to imagine how exciting and blood-stirring it was. We were that kind of lucky group.
We are very ordinary people with nothing much to say. We had such an unusual experience because of China's Sun. For 20 years it has been our second home. In our minds it is much like a miniature Earth. At first, we treated the seams on the mirror as the meridians and parallels of the northern hemisphere. When describing our positions, we would always say we were at so many degrees north latitude, so many degrees east or west longitude. Later, as we became familiar with the mirror, we gradually divided it into continents and oceans. We would say we were in Beijing or Moscow. Each of our hometowns also had a corresponding place on the mirror, and that patch was always the one we cleaned most diligently.
On this little silver earth, we worked hard and fulfilled our duty. 5 mirror cleaners gave their lives for China's Sun. Some did not manage to take shelter during solar magnetic storms, and some were struck by meteorites or space debris.
Now this silver land where we have lived and worked for 20 years is about to disappear. It is hard for us to express our feelings in words. Shuiwa fell silent. Zhuang Yu, now the Minister of Space Industry, took up the speech.
I completely understand your feelings. But here I can tell everyone something comforting. China's Sun will not disappear. I think you all know this already. For such a gigantic object, we cannot use the method of the previous century and let it fall into the atmosphere to burn up. It will find its destination in another way. In fact, it is very simple. If we stop orbital haircutting and make suitable attitude adjustments, solar wind and light pressure will eventually push it past escape velocity away from Earth and make it a satellite of the Sun.
Many years from now, an interplanetary spacecraft will find it in a distant place. Perhaps then we will turn it into a museum, and we will return together to that silver plain to remember those unforgettable years.
Shuiwa suddenly became excited. He asked Zhuang Yu loudly, "Minister, do you really believe that day will come? Do you really believe there will be interplanetary spacecraft?" Zhuang Yu stared blankly at Shuiwa and for a moment could not speak.
Shuiwa continued. In the middle of the last century, when Armstrong left the first footprint on the moon, almost everyone believed humanity would land on Mars within 10 or 20 years. Now 86 years have passed. Never mind Mars. No one has gone back to the moon. The reason is simple. It is losing money.
After the end of the Cold War in the last century, economic principles ruled the world more and more every day. And under those principles, humanity achieved enormous things. Now we have eliminated war and poverty, restored the ecology, and Earth is becoming a paradise. That makes us believe even more firmly in the correctness of economic principles. They have become supreme and have penetrated every cell of us. Human society has become 100% economic. We no longer do anything where input exceeds output. Developing the moon has no economic meaning. Large-scale crude exploration of the planets is an economic crime. As for interstellar travel, that is outright mental illness. Now humanity knows only input and output, and enjoys those outputs.
He let the sentence end there. Zhuang Yu nodded and said,
It is true that human space development in this century is still limited to near-Earth space. There are many deeper reasons for that, and they go beyond today's topic.
They do not go beyond it. Now we have an opportunity. With very little money, we can fly out of near-Earth space and make a long-distance cosmic voyage. Solar light pressure can push China's sun out of Earth orbit, and it can also push it farther away. Zhuang Yu smiled and shook his head.
Ah, you mean using China's sun as a solar sail ship. In theory, there is no problem. The reflector's main body is thin and light, and its area is enormous. After long acceleration by light pressure, in theory, it would become the fastest spacecraft humanity has ever launched. But that is only theory. In practice, a ship cannot sail far with sails alone. There must be people aboard. An unmanned sailing ship can only spin around on the sea and cannot even leave harbor. Stevenson gave a vivid description of this in Treasure Island.
To travel far and return with the help of light pressure, the reflector would need precise and complex attitude control. China's sun was designed to operate in Earth orbit. Without human operation, it can only drift blindly along irregular routes, and it will not drift very far.
Correct, but there will be people on it. I will pilot it.
Shuiwa said calmly. At this moment, the audience statistics system showed that this channel's ratings were rising sharply. The eyes of the whole world were being drawn to it, but you alone still cannot control China's sun. Its attitude control requires at least
12 people. Considering other factors in interstellar flight, at least 15 to 20. I believe there will be that many volunteers. Zhuang Yu smiled helplessly. I truly did not expect our conversation today to move in this direction.
Minister Zhuang, more than 20 years ago, you changed the direction of my life more than once.
But I never imagined that you would walk so far along that direction, far beyond me.
Zhuang Yu said with emotion.
All right, very interesting. Let us continue the discussion. Unfortunately, this idea is not feasible. The most reasonable destination for China's sun is Mars. But have you thought about this? China's sun cannot land on Mars. If it were to land, that would require another enormous expense and would make the plan economically infeasible. If it does not land, then how is it different from an unmanned probe? What would be the point?
China's sun is not going to Mars. Zhuang Yu looked at Shuiwa in confusion. Then where? Jupiter? Not Jupiter either. Farther, farther. Neptune. Pluto. Zhuang Yu suddenly stopped and stared blankly at Shuiwa for a long time. My God,
You cannot mean. Shuiwa nodded firmly.
Yes. China's sun will fly out of the solar system and become an interstellar spacecraft. Like Zhuang Yu, the whole world was stunned. Zhuang Yu stared straight ahead and nodded mechanically. All right. Let us assume you are not joking. Let me make a rough calculation.
As he spoke, he half closed his eyes and began calculating in his head.
I have already calculated it. With the sun's light pressure, China's sun will eventually accelerate to 1/10 the speed of light. Considering the time needed for acceleration, it would take about 45 years to reach Proxima Centauri. Then, it could use Proxima Centauri's light pressure to decelerate, complete exploration of the Alpha Centauri 3-star system, accelerate in the opposite direction, and spend several more decades returning to the solar system. It sounds like a beautiful plan, but in reality, it is a dream that cannot possibly be realized.
You are wrong again. After reaching Proxima Centauri, China's sun will not slow down. It will sweep past at more than 30,000 kilometers per second, use its light pressure to accelerate again, and fly toward Sirius. If possible, we will continue leapfrogging toward a third star, a fourth.
What exactly are you trying to do?
Zhuang Yu shouted, losing control. What we ask from Earth is only one highly reliable but relatively small ecological recycling system. You want to use that system to sustain 20 people for more than 100 years.
Let me finish. And one cryogenic life hibernation system. During most of the voyage, we will be in hibernation, and only when approaching a star will we activate the ecological recycling system. With current technology, that is enough to sustain us in space for thousands of years. Of course, these two systems are not cheap either, but compared with humanity starting from scratch on a crude interstellar exploration mission, the required funding is only 1,000th as much.
Even if it did not cost a cent, the world would not allow 20 people to go commit suicide. This is not suicide. It is exploration. Perhaps we will not even get past the asteroid belt right in front of us. Perhaps we will reach Sirius or even farther. How can we know without trying?
But one thing is different from exploration. You certainly will not come back. Shuiwa nodded.
Yes, we will not come back. Some people are satisfied with wife, children, and a warm bed, and never glance at the world beyond themselves. Others spend their entire lives only to see one thing humanity has never seen. I have been both kinds of person. We have the right to choose all kinds of lives, including life on a mirror drifting through space more than 10 light-years away.
One last question. Over 1,000 years sweeping past one star after another at tens of thousands or even more than 100,000 kilometers per second, sending back faint radio waves that humanity will need decades or even centuries to receive. Does that have much meaning?
Shuiwa smiled and spoke to the whole world. China's sun, flying out of the solar system, will make humanity, sunk in enjoyment, look up at the stars again. It will call back the dream of cosmic voyages and rekindle the desire for interstellar exploration.
Fly toward the sea of stars and turn humanity's gaze back to the depths of the universe. The sixth goal of his life. Fly toward the sea of stars and turn humanity's gaze back to the depths of the universe.
Zhuang Yu stood on the roof of the aerospace tower, gazing at China's sun as it moved rapidly across the sky. Under its light, the capital's high rises cast countless fast-moving shadows, making Beijing seem like a great face turning with China sun.
This was China's sun's final orbit around Earth. It had reached escape velocity and would leave Earth's gravitational field to enter an orbit around the sun. On this, humanity's first crewed interstellar spacecraft were 20 people. Apart from Shuiwa, the others had been selected from more than 1 million volunteers, including 3
mirror farmers who had worked with Shuiwa for many years. Before China's sun had even departed, it had achieved its goal. Human society's passion for exploration beyond the solar system had reappeared.
Zhuang Yu's thoughts returned to that sweltering summer night 23 years before, in that northwestern city, when he and a rural boy from drought-stricken land had boarded the night train to Beijing.
As a farewell, China's sun cast its light spot over each great city in turn, letting people see its light one last time. Finally, China's sun's light spot fell on the great northwest, and the little village where Shuiwa had been born lay within it.
Beside the little road at the edge of the village, Shuiwa's father and mother stood with the other villagers, watching China's sun fly toward the east. Shuiwa's father shouted,
"Son, are you going to a place very far away?"
Shuiwa answered from space.
"Yes, father. I'm afraid I will not be able to come home."
Shuiwa's mother asked,
"Is that place far?"
Shuiwa answered.
"Very far, mother."
Shuiwa's father asked,
"Farther than the moon?"
Shuiwa was silent for several seconds, then said in a voice much lower than before,
"Yes, father. A little farther than the moon."
Shuiwa's parents did not feel especially sorrowful. Their boy was doing great things in that place farther than the moon. Besides, this was an extraordinary age. Even someone at the ends of the earth could be spoken to at any time and seen on a small television, no different from being face to face. But they would not imagine that as time passed, the sun on the little screen would become slower and slower. When his parents asked caring questions, he would have to think for a long time before answering. At first, the thinking time was only a few seconds. Then it grew longer and longer. A year later, every time his parents asked a question, their son would stare blankly and think for more than an hour before answering.
At last, their son would disappear. They would be told that Shuiwa had gone to sleep and that this sleep would last more than 40 years. After that, Shuiwa's parents would spend the rest of their lives continuing to care for the land that had once been barren and had now become fertile, living out lives full of hardship but already content. Their final wish would be that on some distant future day, their son who finally returned home could see a better homeland.
China's sun was flying away from Earth orbit. In the eastern sky, it gradually dimmed, and the blue sky around it slowly shrank to a point. In the end, it would become a star and merge into the multitude of stars. But long before that, the dawn of the stellar sun would drown it completely.
Dawn also lit the little road before the village. Now 2 rows of poplars had been planted along it, and not far away a small river flowed parallel to it. 24 years before, also at this hour of early morning and under the same dawn light, a child from a northwestern farming family had walked away along this road with a vague hope in his heart.
By now the sky over Beijing was bright. Zhuang Yu still stood on the roof of the aerospace tower, looking toward the place where China's sun had last disappeared. It had set out on its long road of no return. China's sun would first enter inside the orbit of Venus and approach the sun as closely as possible, in order to obtain greater accelerating light pressure and a longer acceleration distance. This would be achieved through a series of complex orbital transfers, in a manner much like a sailing ship in the age of navigation tacking against contrary wind. 70 days later, it would pass through the orbit of Mars. 160 days later, it would sweep past Jupiter. 2 years later, it would fly beyond Pluto's orbit and become an interstellar spacecraft. and everyone aboard would enter hibernation.
45 years later, it would sweep past Alpha Centauri, and the astronauts would awaken briefly. A century after China Sun's departure, Earth would receive the exploration data they sent back about Alpha Centauri. By then, China Sun would be on its way to Sirius. With acceleration from the Alpha Centauri triple system, its speed would reach 15% of light speed. 60 years later, which would be a century after its departure from Earth, it would reach Sirius. After China's Sun swept past the Sirius A and B binary system, its speed would increase to 2/10 the speed of light, and it would fly deeper into the starry sky.
According to the time limit that the spacecraft's life hibernation system could maintain, China's Sun might reach Epsilon Eridani, and might even, though the possibility was very, very small, finally reach 79 Ceti. Those stars were believed to possibly have planets.
No one knew how far China's Sun would fly, or what miraculous worlds Shuiwa and the others would see. Perhaps one day they would send a call to Earth and need 1,000 years to receive an echo. But Shuiwa would always remember the country called China on the mother planet. Remember a small village on a dry piece of land in that country's west, and remember the little road before the village. That was where he had set out.